Welcome to Battleground Politics. I'm Mayk, and we're talking New Jersey politics. Voters will choose a new governor in November, with Governor Murphy wrapping up his 8 years in office. With the matchup now set between Democrat Mikie Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli, I spoke with Ciattarelli in a previous Battleground Politics episode right after the primary. And I recently talked to Sherrill as the general election gets underway. Here's that interview with Democrat Mikie Sherrill. Joining us now is the Democratic nominee in the race for New Jersey governor, Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. Thanks for taking some time to speak with us. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So before we dig into some New Jersey issues on the campaign trail, I'll start with some news because we just had a primary election right next door to New Jersey in New York City. Progressive candidate Zohran Mamdani came out on top. This is getting a lot of attention, and it was a different outcome than what we saw in New Jersey. What do the results in New York tell you, and how does that influence the next few months for you in terms of mobilizing voters?
Yeah, so, while I have a lot of differences with Mamdani, I think what we saw from voters and the surge in voting is that voters want a new vision. They want people to take on the status quo and actually come up with innovative, thoughtful ideas of delivering for people. Same old is not going to work for the electorate. So I'll tell you what I saw in New Jersey in our recent primary was just a huge turnout. We saw the Democratic primary had more voters than any primaries ever had in the history of the state. And we saw that, I saw that my message of taking on Donald Trump and the attacks from Washington on everything from cost and healthcare and utility costs and housing costs, and driving all that up, taking that on, protecting rights and freedoms, but also taking on Trenton and the challenges there to drive down costs is critically important to voters.
Yeah, I want to dig into some of those things. Before we leave this, though, will you support Mamdani in the general election? If he's the Democratic candidate, which it sounds like he is, I assume I will. But I actually haven't focused as much on the New York primary because I've been so focused on my own primary. And if he's going to, be working to deliver efficient government and drive down costs, that's something very interesting to me. I'm not sure the voters of New York are very interested in who the election, the candidate here in New Jersey is focused on. I'm focused on my race here. Well, let's talk about your race here as you head into this general election. Jack Ciattarelli, your opponent, has referred to you as Phil Murphy 2.0. So for voters, what is the difference under a Sherill administration from under a Murphy administration?
Yeah, I think voters have seen a clear difference here. Obviously, my background in the Navy and leadership and my vision for taking on and driving change against Trump is very different. I've outlined how I'm going to drive down housing costs and utility costs and healthcare costs, and my plan to do just that, very different from what's going on in the current government and new ideas for how to take on that status quo. And what I think stands in such sharp contrast to Jack Ciattarelli is this sense that he has no vision for the state. He has not delineated what he wants to do other than to simply be in lockstep with Donald Trump. So whether it comes to this piece of legislation that would drive up costs in housing and utilities and healthcare that Jack has supported and doesn't seem to understand how bad it is for New Jersey, or whether it's being asked, what do you differ with Donald Trump about, and having no answer, saying there's nothing he can think of, I could help him out, or what he would do in the event that, the president doesn't follow the Constitution, or that, if there's an executive order that's bad for New Jersey, he said his AG is not going to oppose anything. So it's, I think, a real difference in leadership as well. Jack doesn't present any leadership. I, on the other hand, present a very different vision, not just of what's going on in our state right now and Governor Murphy's vision, but also a very different vision from Jack Ciattarelli's desire to simply be in lockstep with Donald Trump.
You mentioned affordability, prices, costs. That's something that I know you talked a lot about on the campaign. All the candidates did. It's something I also heard from voters. Voters talked to me about. Governor Murphy's been there for the past 7.5 years. What did he not do to prevent high costs in New Jersey that you're going to do? So I think we have to build houses. We see the inventory here in New Jersey is some of the worst in the nation. We've seen housing prices go up by 50% over the last 5 years. And we have to be thoughtful about how we do it because we know we have a densely populated state, but everybody knows an office park that's being underutilized or a strip mall that's empty. We need to repurpose those areas, and I'm going to provide the incentives as governor to do just that. We need to cut through permitting and red tape. It adds millions of dollars to the cost of development, and also help with those first-time homebuyer loans for first-time homebuyers and seniors so they can get into homes or downsize their homes. But we also, I think, have to look across the state at addressing and attacking the rise in costs in healthcare. So we know that the SHBP, the State Health Benefits Plan, is in dire straits. We need to drive down costs. We need to make sure, for example, we're taking out PBMs, those middlemen that are driving up pharmaceutical costs. I'd start by putting in an independent auditor into the SHBP to drive down costs and to determine how we better manage that program. Also making sure that we're taking on rising costs by going after tax cheats so that we can ensure we're not having to raise costs on others for those people who aren't really paying in. And we know that under Chris Christie, for example, they decimated Treasury, so we can't drive down the number of tax cheats we have across the state. So these are all areas that I've laid out so that we can really attack and address costs. And the other thing we've seen is utility costs going up exponentially this summer. That's why I'm so focused on, in the near term, driving in solar power into our grid. It's the cheapest form of energy. We can immediately start to drive down costs with a longer term plan for how we are going to become energy independent in this state.
You mentioned building new homes. For existing homes, though, New Jersey does have a program that's due to start giving seniors who qualify tax credits to pay their property taxes or pay part of their property taxes. Would you continue that program?
You know, I want to make sure that we are stabilizing costs for seniors, because for too many of them, they get into a fixed income and have a very difficult time affording staying here in New Jersey. And obviously that's just, to not be able to see their children and grandchildren grow is horrible. So we want our seniors to be able to stay here. But we have to really also address costs for everyone, because the cost of housing for everyone is simply too high. It's the number one thing that I hear about as I go across the state. So it's both seniors and making sure we stabilize them. But it's also young people, first-time home buyers. I hear from a lot of parents.
Just to be clear on that, so is that a program where you would look to make some changes?
Right now I'm looking for how we stabilize seniors. My focus and where I'd look to make changes is how we start building houses across this state, how we ensure that we're driving down the cost of homes. Supporting seniors and staying here and stabilizing the property taxes for them is something I'm very supportive of.
Okay. I'm going to hop around to a couple different issues so folks can get a sense of you as we start off this general election. Recently, New Jersey was put on a list of sanctuary jurisdictions by the Department of Homeland Security. That list has since been removed from that website. But there's a larger question here about New Jersey's policies. What should New Jersey's policy be relating to cooperation with ICE? What would it be under your administration?
I've long said I think New Jersey, people here in law enforcement are going to follow the law and the Constitution. That is their duty. And so I think making sure that we are doing that is really going to be what's happening under my administration, making sure we're supporting public safety. I've been very concerned when I see that this administration wants to put Marines on the streets, for example, in California. Here in New Jersey, we know that we have some of the most well-trained police officers in the nation. So making sure that we help support them in public safety, making sure we're following the law and the Constitution. And if ICE agents are coming in here and not doing that, that's a real concern for me. And that's something that I would be immediately taking them to court over, to ensure that we are pushing in to ensure that here in New Jersey, we are making sure people are able to have due process rights, for example, that we're following court orders here in New Jersey. Here, we believe deeply in democracy, deeply in our human rights, our our due process rights, our constitutional rights, our rights and freedoms. And that's how I'm charting a different path forward in this state, contrary to what we're seeing coming from the federal government.
You know, when it comes to how you'll handle President Trump and your choice of an attorney general, for example, the differences between you and your opponent, Jack Ciattarelli, are stark. He says his attorney general will not be suing the White House. You have said that your attorney general will be aggressive in taking President Trump to court when he violates the law. Both approaches, though, may have some drawbacks. How do you see your relationship with President Trump if you are the governor of New Jersey? Would you see him as an adversary?
Look, my number one concern is for the people of New Jersey and delivering for the people of New Jersey. And so I see Donald Trump as contrary to the interests of the people of New Jersey. So whether he's driving up mortgage costs or driving up utility costs or driving up healthcare costs or detaining people without any due process or threatening people here in my state based on political partisan agendas. Again and again and again, we have seen that he does not have the interests of the people of New Jersey at heart. In fact, he keeps rolling back things. I was told by members of the State and Local Tax Deduction Caucus, Republican members, that they had talked to Trump early on in his administration, and he realized that that was bad and he was going to get rid of it. And yet now we see he's back again to his old games, imposing the state and local tax cap and even trying to get more aggressive in the Senate on it. So again and again and again, he's attacking the people of New Jersey. He's attacking rights and freedoms, and he's attacking the economy of New Jersey and raising costs on everyone. And I'm really frustrated by this because New Jersey is a state that sends $70 billion more in federal taxes to the federal government than we get back. We fund a large piece of the federal government. And so if they are going to keep attacking us, if they are not going to run the programs that they are responsible for because Trump is attacking them, things like Medicare and Medicaid and the Department of Education, if they are not going to run those programs, then they need to send that money back to us. And the fact that instead we keep seeing these attacks coming from the federal government and these costs going up, up, up from the federal government is something that I'm very opposed to.
Before we run out of time, just a couple quick things I also wanted to ask you about. I know this week you have been talking about the issue of abortion with the anniversary of the Dobbs decision. In New Jersey's law on abortion is different, for example, than what it is in Pennsylvania, where it is 24 weeks is the limit in Pennsylvania. You've said that you'd like abortion rights to be enshrined in the New Jersey Constitution. What's wrong with some limit on abortion at 24 weeks, for example, as Pennsylvania has?
You know, I think what we see is a need for abortion to be a decision between doctors and their patients. And so you're making key decisions. Are you going to protect a pregnancy at the expense of the life of the mother? And sometimes that's what a decision a family might make, that they want to take that risk. But I think that's a decision for the family to make. If you know, I wouldn't want somebody deciding for me whether or not to give up my life in that case. And I think too many times we see these really difficult decisions that families have to make, that moms have to make sometimes, and that should be left up to her. That shouldn't be legislated. And we're seeing the really bad effects of that, where doctors don't feel empowered to make good healthcare decisions, which is why I think we see women in places like Georgia and Texas and Florida dying in emergency rooms on the table when they could have life-saving care, a life-saving abortion, but the doctors don't act in time because they don't feel like they have the power to do so. And women actually die as they're having a miscarriage. And that in this country should never happen. So that's why I want these decisions to be put in the hands of women and their doctors.
One last thing before we go, something that you may have to deal with in your current job, the conflict between Israel and Iran. What is your comfort level with any further involvement by the U.S.?
Look, I'm incredibly concerned that this president does not have a strategy for this and that he's blundering into another war in the Middle East. I am a veteran of a global war on terrorism. We saw 20 years of war, and I don't think we ended that war in a stronger position than when we went into that war. And I think that's because we did not have a good long-term strategy. We did not define success. You simply can't have a war on an ideal like terrorism. You have to define a war strategy and what success means. And this president has not delineated any of that. He's not come to Congress to ask for war powers. And I think part of why you come to Congress as a president is to have that discussion and to test those ideas. None of that has happened. And sure enough, we are seeing the post-battle damage reports and assessments that this has done nothing more than maybe set Iran back by 3 months. We don't know where the uranium is. We don't know if there are other sites where they are having other secret nuclear sites. This all could have been assessed and determined with a more thoughtful government, with a Secretary of Defense that wasn't completely incompetent like we have now. So that is why I have been very concerned about this moving forward. And I think we're seeing the assessments of what this president has done as being very poor and not having achieved any of the goals in which we would want to achieve, but putting us in a much more dangerous situation now.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill, the Democratic nominee for New Jersey governor, thank you for your time. I look forward to talking to you again and meeting up when you are in, when we are both in New Jersey. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you.
That was my interview with Democrat Mikie Sherrill, the Democratic nominee for New Jersey governor. My interview with Republican nominee Jack Ciattarelli is also available in a Battleground Politics episode right now. You can find that and more Battleground Politics on our website, NBC10.com, on our NBC10 app, on our NBC Philadelphia YouTube page, and wherever you get your podcasts.